Hello.
Wow, are we actually happening?
So, just a little bit about your background. If you could kind of tell me about your journey into becoming an herbalist and what that's been like for you.
Yeah, that's a big question. And it's a big question because I don't have an easy answer, like, oh, I went to college for this and and then or my aunt was a herbalist or something nice and clear like that.
Hmm.
Um, no such thing. Hard to say where it started, but my background, you could just say, is mostly experiential.
Hmm.
So I've never been schooled in herbalism. Um, yeah, I mean, I read a lot, but I don't like necessarily uh, adhere to things I'm reading. It's just kind of input for me. It's all input. And it's also mixed too, right? Like I probably came from the same background you came from. I don't know how you grew up, but I grew up in the suburbs. I was pretty disconnected from most everything to do with the earth, and certainly herbalism. I, I don't even know like when I first heard of that or knew that that was a thing, or if I always did. I can't remember, but it was, yeah, like it was a pretty obscure thing, and I think it was really. I mean, most recently, the way I talk about everything almost is that it just happened kind of by accident. I never intended to be a herbalist or anything. Um, I'm an animist, so I'm into the spiritual reality of everything. And herbs are super fucking interesting beings. Like they are kings and queens among us. Like if you can start to assess things energetically, herbs are like amazing beings. And so I think it was just kind of through wanting to interact with them and you learn things, maybe you read things or you hear things from friends or different things as I was going along, but it's mostly from the interest in the plant that the whole kind of ability to use them to heal has come to me. It wasn't through any kind of external teachings or through my will, even, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Um, do you personally identify with any traditional ecological knowledge or specific cultural or spiritual traditions and that influences like your
Mm,
herbalism practice?
yeah. I mean, that's another one of those very, very tricky questions these days.
Hmm.
Um, just being a, white-skinned person and looking the way I do and being a man and older and all that stuff, um, I am ripe for appropriating it and being canceled because of certain statements I probably have made in the past. And if I was being honest, I would make now, but they all have to be said with incredible qualifiers now. So I think the way that I practice herbalism is very similar to the Onondaga or various First Nations people and how they think about the plants and how they think about healing.
Hmm.
How much I learned from them um, is tough to say because, yeah, I've read books and I've worked with lots of First Nations people, but I kind of always felt like I always knew the things and they're just kind of helping me remember what I already knew, what I already know. So it's it's tricky, and the way that I see it is that the earth holds the knowledge, the plants, the animals, the insects, they all hold the knowledge. if you become one with the earth, if you're interacting on a daily basis, constantly with all these beings, the kind of knowledge comes up into you. And so when it was First Nations people, it came up into them. And then, now I'm in the same space, which was their space, and it's coming into me. And so I feel way more akin to First Nations philosophy, their take on plants, their take on history, their take on time, than I do my own European kind of, colonial kind of background, which, I've openly fought against and pushed back against the colonial perspective for like 40 years now. So that's how I've ended up where I am. It's not through kind of ignorance or just being raised in a traditional way or something like that. It's because I've pushed a certain type of information away and I've just gravitated towards other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you personally get to know a plant, and what sources or references do you go to at this time?
Yeah. It's a good question, just in terms of that thing that I was talking about at the start, that I never find plants purely academically. I'm interested. I read about things, Siddha, Kuta, or whatever's happening in the herbal world. I'm interested in it. I take it in, and then, like with everything else. And then what happens is the plant comes to me in some way. So either somebody I know is using it, and we have a discussion about it, and so I have this kind of personal link, like somebody like Abra or somebody, who I respect. And then if I can't grow it, I'm less interested in it. But if it's for something very specific and I think, and I'm feeling a kind of resonance with it, then I take it myself and I see what information I get from taking it. And then kind of lastly, I do research. So if I'm going to actually use it, or I feel things in myself, and this would be true of if I'm growing it out to learn about it, which is generally what I would do. You're looking at the plant, you're feeling it, you're looking at things like doctrinal signatures, the way people talk about that is
Mm-hmm.
similar to how I look at them. And so you're getting information and then you're using it and you're getting information. And then kind of, if I don't feel full enough in terms of my knowledge base of it, then I turn to the research and I look at everything. I mean, I have my favorite people. I have historic people, like Culpeper, like he's kind of the first herbalist that's referred to most often, 1700s, I think, around then. And he has all this astrological stuff. So I'm not super into astrology, but it does mean something to me. I understand something of the planet's nature and stuff. And so he has all that stuff. And then I might look at somebody like Stephen Buhner or Stephen Herod Buhner, because he's a scientific researcher. He just compiles and compiles tons of research and synthesizes it and writes books. So I have my favorites. People who are um, just into the yeah, I read everything, but I definitely like certain characters more than other people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of moving into a section about your perceptions of plants. What methods or frameworks would you say guide your understanding of plants? And do you balance scientific and traditional approaches or utilize like one over the other?
Yeah, well, this is really getting to I can get to the crux of things pretty easily here. And for years I couldn't talk about it because I didn't even understand what was going on with it. But I guess I've again taken in enough kind of peripheral information that I kind of got this thing now, which is that science and the rational brain um, dominates over our intuitive brain. And so we have this kind of understanding like, well, you can't lose with science because that's like reason. And, you know, if you believe other stuff, that's fine, but you should look at it scientifically too. And it's like, no, that's not so. In fact, you lose a great deal as soon as you start to look at things scientifically. Science has a spell to it. And when we fall under the spell of it, everything else, all those intuitive knowings and those other kind of, um, what do they call it, horizontal or whatever leaps in thinking, are kind of brushed aside for the chemistry and the research and what we actually know for sure scientifically about the plants. So just to say, um, I do actively lean into the traditional or what would be called shamanistic ways of interacting with the plants. And I shy away from that other stuff because it is so dominant. And, you know, being raised up, you know, that way too in the Western world, it's even more dominant in people like me. So I think
Mhm.
you have to fight it in a sense. You have to kind of turn away from it to be able to kind of embrace the intuitive and the more lateral kind of thinking. Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah. But again, once I've kind of got my hits and I'm really kind of, I got the plant, then I'm actually interested in the science,
Mhm.
you know, and I do use it when I'm talking to clients and when I'm talking to students and stuff, even though I don't totally understand it. And I think that science is kind of a myth that nobody really understands and that we're making it up as we go along, as we have with other modalities of knowledge, you know, but we don't see that yet because we're all still so trapped in it.
Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Do you see plants as having agency, intelligence, or communicative, sorry, that they can communicate? And if so, how do you experience this, and how does it shape your practice?
Um, well, the answer is definitely yes. The way that it works for me is when you're a client and you come see me, I ask you what's ailing you, what's happening with you, and then like as you're speaking, I move into you. I let your dis-ease move into me, and I hold that, and then the plants present themselves as like agents, as helpers, right? So it's absolutely effortless for me now. All I have to do is hold you and your problem, and then the plants like present themselves. So you could say that that's just me doing all that, that it's just knowledge I've stored and stuff like that. But there's always, it's so unexpected. It's not what I would necessarily, it's not the plants I would necessarily pick. That's the thing. There's a difference. There's something else at work there. And I feel like it is the plants because it doesn't happen to me with plants that I don't intimately know. This only happens with all the plants that I've known for 20, 30, 40 years. Um, they're like families. So just like you might be talking to somebody and they've got a problem, and then you would think of somebody who could help them, it's the exact
Mhm.
same with plants for me.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think there was other
Uh,
parts to your question there, but
I think that encapsulates it.
Okay.
Sorry, my cat is loud sometimes. Um, you kind of you already answered this. If you view plants as beings with whom you can form a relationship, and if so, how does that manifest? Yes.
Right. And it was the communication thing, like how
Yes.
that I didn't, well, I guess I partially answered, but I think it can happen in a whole bunch of different ways too. Like I have that fluidity now for doing it that way, but I have also had plants present in dreams. Just last night, I dreamt about nettle, about stinging nettle. You'd say, oh, that's because you prescribed it to somebody and talked to them about it. But I do that all the time. I don't always dream about it. So, yeah, I have inflammatory problems, like for whatever reason. It was not clear. And lots of the time, it isn't clear why the dream or what the dream means or whatever. It's usually clear in retrospect, like stuff happens and then I'm like, oh, that's what that dream was about. I get it now. um, I've also had kind of people who I guess are the plants speaking to me like in English, and that's happened to me less often, but it's happened enough that it's a thing. I know that's like, and again, there's no way of explaining how that could be other than there's some kind of um, there's some kind of universal language that you are able to communicate with everything that's alive. And then, the translation thing is something that happens in our brain. And so this is always something with visions in general that you have to be careful about, is that there's interpretation even for you to hold the thing. Like the idea of unwrapping a bundle. When you get information, it's like in a bundle, like a blanket that's been bundled up. And so you kind of have to slowly unroll it to even be able to take those things in.
Mhm.
They need a context or ground.
Yeah. So being in relation, how would you personally gauge like how connected you're feeling to either specific plants or just like plants in general? Is there like a spectrum of like connectedness you feel?
Like within myself or within all of
Yes.
us, or
Yeah. Like say at a time you're feeling disconnected,
oh,
like do you feel that kind of sway of connection?
I would say no, not not anymore. Probably if I did ever kind of get that kind of thing going on, it would have been before I had Lyme.
Hmm.
Because really that was like a big marker for me. That was 12 years ago. And it was the second time I got it, but the first time I got it, it was in the States and I took antibiotics and seemed to clear it right up. Like 10 years after that first time, I got it again and I didn't know what it was. And I really went down. Like it really got me. And wasn't diagnosed when I went to the doctor, and that typical kind of story for Lyme. And so it was a matter of life and death, really
Yeah.
connecting with the plants and learning. And then you're taking like 20, 30, 40 different herbs at a time, to make yourself
Yeah.
better, like for all different reasons. And so I think I was just so submerged in that world, and kind of like I said, for my own survival, that ever since, because basically as I started getting better, then I started treating people mostly for Lyme, is
Yeah.
kind of mostly what I'm not known for. So it's broader now, but there was a period where most of the people I saw were all kind of Lyme.
Okay. Um, What do you think are the benefits of having a stronger connection with plants?
Well, I mean, the way that I've talked about it before and the way that I see it is like when this thing happens with the plants, I know it's the right plant. Now, my rational brain and other parts come in when I have to think about the form it's going to take and dosage. Usually I don't get that information. That's something I have to make up. So that's based on experience. And so I can be wrong about that. But the plant I'm sure about. I mean, it's just happened so many hundreds of times that I have no doubts about it. If it's wrong, then I'm like it's about something in the person, like it's never wrong. It's just I'm answering the wrong question with it or something, right? Like I know that for sure. Um, and again, I think by modern standards, that sounds dangerous and it sounds like a place you would not want to be because we have this kind of, again, this notion that, you know, as an equation, the illness could be these different things. And you want to have, say, like at least as a herbalist or probably as a doctor too, three indicators as to which of those things it could be. So it could be psychological, physical, something about the tongue, something about your hands, your face. Like it could be a whole range of different things, but you're looking for those three indicators. And that's because, in a sense, it's a way of keeping yourself in check and not letting you just run with something like what I'm talking about. So if it's a toxic plant, obviously, well, not obviously, I'm telling you, there's a part of me that's seriously doubtful that this is the plant for the person. Or I understand right away that it has to be like a homeopathic dose, like super, super one drop or two or maybe three kind of thing. Like really, really small amounts of stuff. So I don't take risks in that sense, but I do this thing which I think is frowned upon generally. And, whatever. I find like discussions about what it could be or second guessing myself or things like that actually just interfere for me with the flow of the whole thing. So, well, yeah, like I said, if it's a plant that can actually harm, then I'm highly skeptical and critical and really only going to give it in a certain way that it's probably going to be safe. Yeah.
Um, how do you think cultural or societal attitudes towards plants shapes the way that people perceive their connection to the natural world?
That's another one of those huge questions and
Yeah.
very kind of heady. But I've thought a lot about these things, so I can answer it, I guess. Um, we to an alarming degree come from a colonial Christian perspective, and even though you might be like, oh, well, I didn't colonize anybody, and I'm not Christian, and I don't believe in any of that stuff. You just haven't got to know yourself yet well enough. We are unbelievably uh, kind of offensively objectifying in the way we think of reality. And so, where, maybe other cultures or us at other times would have had immediate kind of kinships and respectful relationship with the plant and realize, because of folklore and because of other things, that there's consequences. If you disturb certain plants in certain places, they can curse you. Like it's actually really serious stuff. And so we had this kind of innate sense of their power right off. Whereas now we approach things like it's just nothing. It's like, it's just another thing. And oh, this thing can do this. And then we grab it, with our big grabby hands that we have as humans and scare the shit out of the spirit of the plant because we are very aggressive. We don't think we're being aggressive, but even in our passivity, we're being aggressive. We had much more kinship with these beings in all the rest of our time here on the planet, like 200, 300,000 years, not just a couple thousand years. So this whole thing, this is where this thing, and I rub up against the indigenous knowledge thing is like we've all been indigenous people for literally hundreds of thousands of years. It's just this super thin little veneer of about 1,000 years that we pretended were something other than that. And somehow this excludes us from having any of this knowledge because my skin is this color. Like it just doesn't make, even in rational terms, it doesn't make any sense. Our kind of knee-jerk reaction towards that. And the way that it does make sense is like when we have a knee-jerk reaction towards anything, it's because of something in ourselves that we're afraid of. And we are afraid of indigenousness. We are afraid of that thing. We pushed away from it for so long, like arguably thousands of years for some of us. And so, as it comes back towards you, there's a lot of fear and a lot of doubt and a lot of compromise, I guess, in even just coming to see this perspective. And, as a bit of a side thing, this pretendian thing of people who have full on claim to be indigenous people, and we gone after them, right? We canceled them. So Buffy St. Marie might be one of the kind of top people. But there's lots of others for many, many years, all the way, back to Grey Owl and even further back. Well, the thing is those people aren't native by our definition of what native is. From an indigenous perspective, many people would say that they were native people. Say somebody like Buffy, who was adopted by different tribal people. So right from the start, we have this whole kind of theory, and then we crucify them because we held them up as this thing that was false in the first place. It wasn't their falseness, it was our falseness. And that it's always these people because they are, in fact, intermediary people coming from the Western white world and then taking on a native identity. They become intermediaries. So those are the ones that white people are most able to connect with. Whereas, people who were raised traditionally haven't been educated in, the Western culture's idioms and all that stuff. They'd have no interest in teaching us, first of all. And then we wouldn't be able to relate to them because they'd say things like, if you stay out in the dark at night, the snakes will crawl into your mouth and then down into your belly. And we'd be like, I don't understand what you're talking about or whatever, right? So anyways, that was quite a long little side thing, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about recently. Not to defend or justify or anything like that, but just saying it happens this way for a reason over and over, Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you brought up Buffy. I love her music.
Yeah, well, so there you go.
Yeah, I'll support her always.
And see, that's the thing, right? Is it's confusing because she has a good heart, and
Yes.
she's singing from a place for women and for Indigenous people that's super empowering.
Mhm.
And anyways, I really struggle with her, and yeah, just lots of different people who have been, you know, really, really canceled.
Mhm.
Yeah, as though they're just frauds, and it's that simple.
Yeah. Okay, shifting into practices. Um, how do you ensure ethical and sustainable practices when working with plants? And does this differ in something like in a wild space versus a cultivated garden?
You're talking just about the plants,
Yes.
right? Um, I guess it's pretty much all based on experiential knowledge. I mean, maybe with plants, sometimes somebody has told me something or I know something about it, like through somebody else's experience, but I figure this stuff out pretty quick. Um, I've made a couple mistakes in my time where I over harvested something and then it was gone. So we're talking in the wild here mostly, and I guess the concern really is mostly in the wild. If you're growing it in your own gardens and stuff like that, I mean, you'll figure out if you're over harvesting and you'll suffer the price for it, which is you'll lose the plant or whatever. Um, but in the wild, well, there's like the way that I teach it is there's a general rule of thumb that the number of years that the plant takes to become mature where it can produce seed to generate more plants is the percentage of the plant that you can take. So the easiest way to think of it is by examples. So like with ginseng, forest grown ginseng, it's like literally 12, 16 years before it starts to fruit and produces seed that will make more ginseng. It spreads by rhizome too, a little bit, but mostly it's all just by seed. So that means 1 in 16 you could take. This is just a general way of understanding. And so if a plant takes 4 years, say like echinacea, it should be the root that's harvested in year 4, ideally, like for a really common example. It's not commercially, but if you're a herbalist, you leave it in for 4 years because they get stronger. That would be 1 in 4 plants. Yeah. And then you're always trying to get under that. That's like the maximum. And then you're looking at your patch and you're looking at the health and the vigor of stuff. Because, with some things at some times, it's like, well, like dandelions are a good example where it actually only takes them 1 year to grow the whole root, the leaf, and to make a flower. Um, so in theory, that's 1 in 1. So you could harvest 100% of them. But if you harvest 100% of them, then they won't be back at all, right? So you want less, but you actually only do need a few dandelions to go to seed in your garden and to continue. But I actually had this thing where I used to have apprentices here for 6 months of the year, 4 people, and 1 year there was a young woman who, she'd been super helpful. She was really lovely, and really liked her, had a good summer and stuff. And at the end, she said, "Could I harvest like herbs for myself for the winter, like when I go?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." And so I saw her at different points in the day, and then like the next day, and then I realized like she had actually cleaned me out of like all sorts of stuff because she didn't realize that was kind of it. Like this is the balance I'm always working with is yeah, there's a patch here, and a patch there, and a patch there of those things. But if you clean those out, then I have to have like what I'd call a moratorium on harvesting. And this has happened to me with dandelion and burdock, where I let classes or students or whatever just go a little too crazy, and then there's barely any the next year, so then you just don't harvest any for a few years. And there's other stuff in the wild, like say lobelia, that's the infilata, that one. That's a very, very fussy plant and can be offended super easily. And if you offend that plant, then it's gone from that spot. It won't be there the next year. It doesn't make any sense. But, when I taught at the college there, um, if you ever said anything about something being psychoactive, or you could smoke it, or you could get some kind of effect from it, they'd always want to harvest it. And then what would happen sometimes is they'd go back because they know I wouldn't let them. And so then they go back and harvest it, when I can't see. And this happened with lobelia once, and then the patch was completely gone. And then I think it happened a second time, and I was like, oh my God, there's something just this plant can be offended so easily, and it just disappears. So I think some plants are kind of really, just like people, some plants are super giving and open and friendly, say like red clover. She's just there for everybody. She's like the middle sibling, right? She just makes everything kind of work and gets along with everybody. Is always kind of happy and and giving of herself. And in fact, by taking red clover, you enrich the ground because it releases nitrogen when it's harvested and stuff. So just to say there's a huge spectrum of plants, and then depending on where they're growing and how they're growing would always dictate these different things. So lots and lots of different considerations. But just to say, it only happened once. There was one wild mint, and I was like, it's a mint, right? So I basically harvested it all. But it was a really, it's in the mint family, but it doesn't grow like a mint. It's what's it called? Mountain mint. It's a form of mountain mint. I think there's 5 different ones that grow in Ontario. And anyways, yeah, if you cut them all back, then you just cut off all the seeding, the chance of it seeding, and then it doesn't come back the next year. Anyways, so that happened like once, and then ever after that, I was ever more cautious about, if I didn't know something, I probably would just take enough for a little sample and then actually look it up and see, okay, make sure this is a perennial, and then, how vigorous does it grow and all that stuff. And what's vigorous in one place, what's invasive, what's considered invasive in one place will struggle to grow here, or to grow someplace else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's hard. Like if you were trying to make, some kind of bylaws or something, if you're trying to define harvesting, like with anything else like that, it would be poor because it would be done statistically and it would make sense in one way, but not in every case, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very hard because it's so local, but even the yearly conditions can vary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really, our sense of, ownership in a way is what it comes down to. Once you have a relationship with these plants, there is a sense of ownership and responsibility that goes with that. And so that's like by far the best guide, because you're never going to once you know what you're doing, you're never going to over harvest because you're just shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any specific actions, such as ceremonies or rituals, that you perform to honor plants or show gratitude to them?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for hours. So there's a big range, but always there's a giving. And, sometimes I'll use tobacco or a bit of sage, even a bit of your hair, pull out some of your hair. Um, just the gratitude, the offering, the honoring of the plant before you start in, so that's always there. Yeah.
How do you use your senses, such as touch, smell, taste, observation, to connect with plants within your practice?
Yeah, I mean, that is a really good question for me because it is how I receive the information. Um, so I guess there's a good kind of reason, and I think you had a question about doctrine of signatures, but your senses are certainly one of the things that's helping you read the plant as kind of symbol or metaphor. And what was the other part of the question?
Just how do you use your senses,
Oh yeah, the
whichever
senses.
senses you mostly use to connect with plants in your practice?
Okay.
Like,
Yeah, so the how is I guess the how is that's trickier. Um I mean, how do you use your senses? How are you using them now?
yeah, I think more like what do you most often rely on?
Mm.
Like more
Oh
you
yeah.
connect, say,
Oh yeah.
with taste. Like
Okay.
that's usually what you engage with more.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess there is some kind of obvious things there, but um smell really. Um Smell is so much more nuanced than taste in a sense. And we're built that way, right? So that we smell things before we eat them. We're, and I kind of feel like um, when I smell a plant and I rub it now, it kind of touches the parts in my brain that the plant's going to affect, or even in my body. So I'm really, really into the smell. Like my wife always makes fun of me because I'm just like, and just really, really, really getting deep inside that smell, because all the information is there. And then of course, you have your knowledge base that if something, you know, has a kind of a sour or a bitter note or a sweet note or whatever. Like these are all indicators for its value, I guess. Yeah, its values.
Hmm.
So that is really, really important. And visual and just touching is also like important. Like for example, um, I'm learning about ashwagandha by growing it. And so if you look it up, it's like just the root of the plants that you used or whatever. But when it came time to harvest it this fall, I distinctly felt the medicine in the aerial part of the plant. And that was like in my hands, I guess my eyes. And it was just like, oh, no way. Like this has tons of medicine. And then I look it up and I find out that traditionally the leaf and all that stuff was used just as much as the root, but that it does have certain toxins in it. And then I think it's like the supplement industry as related to bodybuilding, because ashwagandha has hormones in it that will help you put muscle on. And so it's in a lot of those um, like powder, you know, things. Yeah. And so they were using the leaf because it was cheaper or it was a substitute. and taking huge amounts of it because you're trying to do this thing where you're building your muscles or whatever, and so totally abusing the thing, and then alarms in all the Western use of it and banned, and even within herbalism now, nobody talks about using the leaves, but if you talk to somebody from India or where the plant's from, they'd just be like, yeah, of course you use the leaf, the fruit, the the root, and in fact, if you do research on it, the leaf is better indicated for things like diabetes and certain things that people are using the root for here. So that's a long-winded answer, but just to say, yeah, you can feel things, and you get to that place where you can feel stuff and the levels of toxicity, and yeah.
Mhm. So moving into like broader reflections and impacts, um, how do you think your work as an herbalist can inspire others to build a stronger connection to the natural world?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm uh, not uniquely, but I think there's not many folks out there who can kind of um, make that bridge like I can for people. Because if you're just studying the phytochemistry of the plants, the medicine and the body and all this stuff, you're still not at all connected to the natural world. You probably wouldn't even know the plant if you were standing on it. Most herbalists that learn in that way now. So those are the people who I get coming to the school and who I used to get as apprentices, is they're kind of like, I have all this knowledge about the plants, but I don't feel connected to them at all. I don't even know them. And, that feels weird. And it is weird. It's a super backward way of learning stuff, but that's kind of how we are. And so you stumble on somebody like me and you're kind of like, oh, this guy's not talking any phytochemistry stuff. There's no kind of scientific jargon. He's talking about something else here, a more direct way of knowing things. Um, and that is what I'm interested in. It's what I teach in the school. I understand the value of learning like a traditional modality, like say, like TCM, like traditional Chinese medicine, like obviously there's huge value in that, but we come from this culture where we think we never have enough. We never have enough knowledge because the way we're looking at it, we never do have enough knowledge. And so you keep getting more and more degrees and you keep searching and searching and searching. And it's like that old story, of this person who travels all over the world to find out that the gold was actually buried right under their house in their backyard or whatever, right? It's like that's the reality, is we just have to be and stop with all the searching and grasping, because the grasping itself is a distraction from being, like again with the science thing, not to be harping on that, but and it could be another kind of distraction. It might not have anything to do with science, but it's that same seeking, wanting more, like outside ourselves. Whereas really, we need more of this, people to just say, no, no, we already have all the knowledge. We just have to be calm enough and still enough and be with the plants. And then we remember it. It comes back to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you see as the broader implications of forming a closer relationship to plants for human society and the environment?
Well, it's the only thing that's going to save us. It's the only thing that ever has saved us. And like if we could just be humble about it, and see these beings as our ancestors, in a sense. They created us. they've supported us. They're always here for us. And, if we could change our perspective that way and start to see them in that kind of a light, then it changes everything. Like on my property here, if I have to do something like build a cabin or make a road or do anything like that, I'm always just like, okay, what plants are going to have to be wrecked to do this, right? And then you ritually make amends, like you have an obligation to take care of these plants. So you just can't invite a bulldozer to come in and clear them all out. You either have to do it yourself or you do ceremony and let them know what's going to happen and, honor maybe the same species someplace else. You're making offerings or making sure you're making up for it somehow. Like if you're connected that way with the animate world, development is so difficult.
Yeah.
And so this madness that we're in of constant development and not utilizing what's actually there and what we have, but always wanting to build more, 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 more. That drops off real quick when you're suddenly like, it's like being surrounded by family. And if you want to build an extension, you have to kill your, cousins or whatever over there. You're not going to build an extension. It's that simple.
Mhm.
I mean, I think I heard this in Israel, I guess, with like the Hasidic, a lot of the more fundamental Jewish people, there's this whole law about not cutting down any fruit trees ever. You're not allowed to, period. If it produces nuts or fruits, not allowed. Or you have to get a rabbi to say it's okay to do or whatever. And it was exactly this scenario where it was like 10 people living in this little house and there was like a fig tree and they couldn't make the extension of the house because the tree was there or whatever. They wanted to double the size of the house and they had to have a rabbi in and he was like, well, no, you can't cut this one down, but maybe you could do this thing or something like that. Like that's how we should be thinking about our vegetative relatives here, just like these beings are precious. Just because you want something, it doesn't mean that you get to just do this unilaterally. There's no
Mhm.
consensus. There's no negotiation. We're really on to that now with people and different kinds of people and all that stuff, that we all deserve a voice and to be heard and seen. But boy, we haven't done it with nature yet, that's for sure. Maybe the megafauna, right? We're into the megafauna, but
Yeah,
everything else, yeah,
sure.
nuts.
What structural changes do you think you'd like to see either within Ontario or Canada broadly to foster a better relationship with plants?
Um, Shut off all the internet and shut down all the schools
Yeah.
and make people grow their own food. And then it will all just come naturally from there.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm so far away from agreeing with the way it is now. I have nothing to say about it. I mean, it feels to me like herbs are being well, there was the drug identification number kind of law thing that came into effect. I think it was like 25 years ago or something. I was even consulted at the time about it ridiculously. But anyways, it took them 20 years to figure out how to enforce it. So now they've figured out how to enforce it, which was through the product distributors. They just go after them and find them, and then they regulate all their their people, their producers. And then now it's happening to herbalism and even small markets where you can't have like a herbalist stall. I can't just have a herbalist stall in a small market like I have for the last 30 years anymore. You need corporate liability insurance. You need to have had all the product inspected. And our health inspector locally, I feel like fucking killing this guy. He says you can't use any wild herbs, period. Right?
Mm.
Because somehow that's seen as dangerous. And I'm like, since when? Anyways, it, he's just so incredibly ignorant. It's kind of unbelievable. So we are going in the wrong direction of regulating for safety. And then at the same time, they're fucking with our RNA and they're doing all these other things that we have not consented to and that really might have to do with our longevity and safety as a race. Herbs are the very least of the threat out there. I mean, holy smokes. And they've pretty much done away with homeopathy, which is still the most popular form of medicine in the world, but not in North America. That's for sure. They've ridiculed it and had it on numerous CBC programs, debunking, I guess, or whatever you'd call it, that it's a real thing. I know it's a real thing. Like, I know it doesn't make sense. There's not a lot of material in the way of molecular phytochemistry in those remedies, but that's not how they work, right? It's not really how herbs work, but people don't really get that. So.
Well, my last question I have is just if you have anything else you'd like to share about your relationship with plants or the work you do as an herbalist.
I had some pretty good rants in there, so I think I'm good. What's your personal interest, just out of curiosity?
Yeah. I've always been interested in herbalism. Like my grandmother just has such a love of plants, and I grew up drinking like every form of herbal tea imaginable. So I've just always been very attracted to just the flavors, but then also, what they contain. And then just recently thinking with like a animistic scope of what other characteristics they have, not just, what vitamins, but further, like their character and everything, just our relationship to them. So I've really been interested in following that path recently. Yeah, I don't have any strict education or anything in herbalism, but just a personal interest and something I kind of interact with on the daily. So I really, yeah, I just really interested to hear about your experiences and other herbalists because I think, since time immemorial, we've been using plants as medicine and relating to them. So I'm just really excited, and I think that relationship is really important. And I hope that other people can experience that as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and I think the thing with academic stuff is to turn it into something that is publicly accessible. Like when I got my MA, I mean, it sat for almost 20 years before I did something with it. But I always intended to do something with it, to make a book from it, because it's like, well, if you just write an MA and it's in the library at Trent University or something, like, how many people are going to read it, right? Like almost nobody. But if you can put a spin on it and make it into something more palatable, like the language itself usually needs a lot of work compared to the academic text. But I think that's a good goal. Are you looking for more people?
I am. I already have maybe 8 people so far. So
Okay.
if you know anyone that would be like interested in this sort of thing, I'd be open to that.
Yeah, I mean, Tamara at Hawthorne Herbals.
Okay.
I think she's pretty lovely and pretty thinks in a kind of similar vein to myself.
Hmm.
Um, do you know about Abra? Um,
Abra? No.
okay. She runs the school out of Ottawa. She's kind of got more students than anybody around. She's kind of like the biggest teacher in Ontario these days, I would say.
Okay.
Um, so she is busy and she's a little bit crabby, but she's super interesting and does know a lot about like traditional uses. One of her recent books, oh, I have it here. I can't remember what it's called, but it's just like the myths about these plants, the old stories about them that are kind of lost. And I guess
Yeah.
she's got a bit of interpretation in there herself.
Hmm.
She goes after really interesting things like around, well, women's issues.
Yeah.
So around things like birth and abortives and um, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So what's her last name? I call her Abracadabra. Um, it's like it also starts with a A. It's not Abrams. Um, I don't know. I can't remember it right now. But
Okay.
probably if you just put Abra A Herbalism Ottawa or something, she'll come up.
Okay.
Anyways, both those ladies are very good friends. So if you say you did this with me, they would likely sign on if they wouldn't, anyways.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think those are probably the most two would be the most two interesting for you to talk to that are active herbalists.
Yeah.
You know, there's
Okay.
lots of people out in the hills here who are, kind of just lay herbalists and do stuff for themselves that are would be interesting. But
Hmm.
I think it's yeah. And Abra's like super science brain, but she's also totally a witch. So she's kind of interesting that way that she's very intuitive and reads stuff like that constantly. But then she also has that kind of encyclopedic brain that could give you all the phytochemistry of everything and how it works in the body.
Hmm.
Well, she teaches it, so it tends to
Yes.
stick in your brain when you teach stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Also wanted to ask if you have any ideas of like how to spread my research so it is more accessible. Like so far I'm thinking like the YouTube videos, possibly like a podcast format. Yeah. Just so like you were saying, so it doesn't like just sit in a library.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm definitely not the person to ask, but the podcast thing is definitely a thing. I guess you kind of have to be committed to stay at it for a certain amount of time so that people will find you and stuff. Have a
Yeah.
good name. Um, yeah, I mean, yep, YouTube topic, on the right topic, traditional herbs or whichever, you're leaning towards. Yeah, I wish I knew. I mean, it's funny because some of the best stuff I find on the internet has like 2,000 views or maybe 5,000 views or something. And then I click to some music video that just came out like 3 weeks before and it's got like 200,000 views. And you're just like, fuck, man, people aren't just they just miss all the good stuff because it seems kind of more boring on the surface, but it's frustrating. And I have
Mhm.
no idea. Like people, it was like I just got my first phone. So first cell phone, I've resisted this long, but my kids are growing up and there's more space happening. And so I don't have access to my wife's phone, which is part of the way I got away with not having one, is
Mhm.
just use somebody else's. But just to say, I'm way out of the learning curve, way out of the arc for this stuff. So I partially got the phone so I can just start to maybe do stuff like just record myself talking about stuff. But
Mhm.
it'll
Yeah.
take me a while to get comfortable with that.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's the
Well,
phone, the damn phone rules the world. So whatever.
yeah. Yeah, I've thought about going back sometimes too. I'm like, I'll just get a flip phone, get a landline, because it does seem to like now you have to answer it and
Yeah,
it draws your attention. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
very
I
true.
want to thank you so much for meeting with me and answering my questions and for all your work. I really appreciate it. And I'll send the recording to you.
Hmm,
And if you have any other questions or anything, feel free to reach out. Yeah.
great, thanks. Yeah, I
All
think it
right.
was good. I think there was lots of bits in there that maybe we could use because I forget the beginner's mind too, right? Like this is the other thing is when you do something for 40 years, you forget how people see it and what's important for them to know right off or whatever. So just having your questions, I could see right away, like, oh yeah, these are the good beginner questions that like we need to answer for people instead of me talking about shamanistic herbalism or something right off. They click on that, and I haven't done any ramping up to get there, kind of things. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it could be
For
useful
sure.
for us just to say thank you too.
Yeah, of course. All right.
Okay,
Well, wish you a good day and
thanks.
take care.